requesting from God, my Creator, to bless this work to our needs, with special blessings to all those less fortunate than we are. All the best of every good fortune for the good. Amen.
Amen to that.
Amen.
All
Okay.
right. So, hey, everybody, I just wanted to introduce you. We did meet briefly yesterday, but William Henshaw, Run Vrooman, William Henshaw, and I'm Mary Trudell. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today's Skype program is about the Republic and how to restore it, where we're at as a nation, and how we can overcome some of the difficulties we find ourselves in from, I guess, from a legal and lawful standpoint, who we are as Americans, to the idea of a United States citizen, what that entails, what's going on with these states versus the de facto states. I guess there's a lot to encompass. I don't know if you guys know this right now, but people are losing their children all across America. Children are being stolen from the front porch steps, with the help of not only CPS, but sheriffs that are actually aiding and abetting these criminals. And it's just, we got a lot going on. I mean, right now, trafficking of persons, from what I understand, is a $92 billion industry, which is insane. And we got to do something to stop this nonsense. And I'm hoping, Ron, if you could start today and just, bring the American people up to speed as to what you've uncovered and what you know about it.
I'd be happy to. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here.
I wrote this down so that I could get it across without making mistakes or leaving things out. Uh, I hope you'll forgive me for that. But the preceding to this, and the first paragraph is a partial excerpt from an action that we're taking now. And one must have firsthand working knowledge of our Declaration of Independence, Confederation, and Perpetual Union's articles, and the United States of America's Constitution circa 1859, and Oregon's Constitution and Statehood documents circa 1859, verified lawful statutes at large, and ratified lawful treaties. These documents are now part of this collection escrow. That's what we started, our latest step. As the burden of proof is upon the GSA, General Services Administration, the United States Federal District Court of Portland, the U.S. DOJ, the U.S. Marshal Services, Department of Homeland Security agents for the de facto United States of Washington District of Columbia. They are required to show their bona fides upon demand, and it is so demand. It is claimed that the entities with the building, the Marco Hatfield Federal Building, are on federal land acquired by eminent domain taking. Provide your proof or lose all claim in a quiet title change to our lawful de jure Oregon, Article 1, Section 1, the state among the several states, foreclosure or eviction, and it's dated with the docket number. This is our current step on 5 buildings on Oregon. We are not the de facto. The de facto was, and has been, and will not be in our future. No longer in charge. Legally and lawfully, there is the United States of America and its government management service company, United States of Washington District of Columbia. In that, the several states contracted within a document named the Confederation and Perpetual Union's Articles, one of which is the Constitution. Articles, pardon me, America on the north is the Arctic Ocean shore, and on the south, the tip of Tierra del Fuego. It's the Atlantic Ocean on the east and the Pacific on the west, subdivided into north, south, and central. The de jure provisional government, Article 1, Section 1 of Oregon's Constitution, removes the de facto by its existence. All rights inherent in the people. We declare that all men, when they form a social compact, are equal in right, that all power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. And they have at all times a right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manner as they may think proper. This is what we deem proper, and none have rebutted us. What happens when the de jure men and women with their offspring expatriate from the de facto to the de jure? We deny all pessimistic bullshit. I explain to you correctly? For example, there is no ratified preamble to the Constitution. It is play pretend. A man or woman with their children, the body, mind, spirit, flesh, blood, soul people on the land and soil of their state or territory, without ruler and without subject, are sovereign. To satisfy a claim of status, standing, venue, and jurisdiction, we choose a simple living testimony in the form of an affidavit in truth, signed in red with a red thumbprint, with two witnesses doing the same. We provide a sample: birth certificates, state national, U.S. citizen, straw man, trust money, registering with the de facto, real ID, and more are all diversions, distractions designed to keep us away from our goal. Think MK Ultra. The goal on Oregon was to return to a constitutional Republican form of government in 2022. That was attained on time and under budget on Oregon in 2022. To remove the de facto and replace it with the de jure, we deposit our living testimony in our jury pool. Our Oregon Statewide Jural Assembly, aka Article 1, Section 1, from that moment on, it is a claim of cognizance from our court in the de jure to any in the de facto. We claim jurisdiction and venue. Thus, we deny any de facto authority over us. This whole paperwork process can be done by 5 people on any state or territory. We use 6. I got an extra person as a standby, and we all showed up. 15 hours of total work, $50 for postage, and $40 for a seal in 21 days lawfully, 31 if you use the de facto calendar. The paperwork is completed for lawful transfer of power from de facto to de jure. There are several hundred of us now. We are doing Oregon and helping others. All our documents are signed, sealed, stamped, and served, usually by Universal Postal Union Treaty. Not one rebuttal. We are Article 1, Section 1 of Oregon's Constitution, a civilian court of record, grand jury, trial jury, with Article 3, one Supreme Court claiming original jurisdiction, found in our Amendment 7 court, whose verdict, whose jury verdict,
Mhm.
has no appeal in law. This was implemented with Ex parte Milligan, which nullified martial law, Lieber Code, and FEMA. We are also Oregon's Second Amendment well regulated militia. The provisional de jure Oregon government declared in 2022, concluding 4 years without rebuttal. So that's a brief, but I think adequate explanation of what we're doing.
Awesome. What do you think about that, Bill?
And I'm making notes here and listening to every bit of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I started out, and you may know, actually, my second law teacher was Robert Wongard, right up there in Portland, Oregon. And he's since passed away. I learned a lot from him. They went and did research back in the day, just like I did before internet and everything. And we got a lot of stuff together, um, to help us push forward. And as you probably also know, Oregon's one of the last states admitted into this union. There's only 33 of them. So I'm not sure if it was Oregon or Minnesota, but the same year.
It's Oregon, 1859. It was
Yeah,
the
I thought it
last
was
state.
Oregon. Yeah, sounds right to me. And a lot of
You're
Just froze up, Bill.
glitching a little bit, Bill. There it goes. Okay, there you go. You were
what?
glitching just a little bit. Go ahead.
Oh, anyway, the Seventh Amendment, and I leveled them in South Carolina with my arraignment after being hauled across the country for 2 months. Because the first thing they charged me with practicing law without a license, I laughed and I said, I don't practice it, I get it right the first time. And then they said, well, we got to check you out to be sure you're competent. And if I could have thrown up my hands, I was manacled hand and foot in a red jail suit. I said, oh my God, barked at a judge, Ferretta v. California, 422 U.S. 806. The problem with that is the Supreme Court ruled in Barron v. Baltimore, 7 Peters 243, the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to the states. Shut them up in 60 seconds. It's a $1 million video if I had it. But the point here is that the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to the states. I'm wondering whether that Seventh Amendment citation, with the justices we have now, by the way, on the Supreme Court, it may not matter. In earlier eras, it would. Today, we have people that know what we're talking about here. They get it. Unprecedented window of opportunity. If the Republicans win the election in 2 years, they're going to be there through the 2030s. And now they're going to have our backs on a lot of our issues, just like these. They know. They know exactly.
I got a question for you on that. If we agree that there is an Article 3, one Supreme Court claiming original jurisdiction where a man can find remedy against the state, if we agree on that, do you know where that court is found?
Interesting question. And I'm just doing, by the way, I don't know if I think I sent it to you, Mary. I have a petition. You ready for this? Keaton, class action, non-statutory, federal writ of habeas corpus in the original jurisdiction of the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. Now, the original court there might be the District Court of the District of Columbia, and I don't have the reference for that off the top of my head, but it's a very interesting question. But these justices are acting like the real deal now, first time in 90 years. And they sound exactly like me, sometimes from exactly the same reference book I used, especially with territorial law. And that case was 8-1, not 5-4. They get it. So I do think that's the court. I have some problems, though, Ron, because among other positions I take, we haven't had an election. Are you ready for this one? Since November the 6th, 1860.
I agree.
And that it could be earlier than that, but I think November 6th, good. I'm glad you understand the concept there, because without any elections, they're out of business. Number one. Number two, Article 2, Section 1, U.S. Constitution, you're probably well aware of it. What does it say? All members of the House and Senate have to be inhabitants of the state they represent. If there are no states, there have been no qualified members in Congress for about 140 years. Either way. And of course, nowadays we elect the U.S. senators, and I'm sure both of you are well aware that's an appointed position by state legislatures. That's the difference between a federated Republican form of government and an elected despotism, which is what troubled racists like Jefferson and Madison. Federalist Papers number 48. That's all we have today, elective despotism. That's what it is we need to get rid of.
We call it a benevolent form of martial law that has turned malevolent. That's what we call it.
An interesting way to put that. And I see, by the way, you cited the case of Ex parte London P. Milligan. I'm well familiar with that one.
Yes.
And they made some good rulings there. That was the case that he was tried in a martial law court in Indiana. But the problem was that the war between the states didn't exist there at the time, so they had no jurisdiction.
Yes.
You may also be familiar with Ex parte William H. McCarroll, and the very next year. And the Supreme Court ruled the Reconstruction Act of 1867 unconstitutional, and that takes out the 14th Amendment. It's gone. They were not allowed to announce the opinion because Congress removed appellate jurisdiction from the court. And they took no action. They could have easily transferred that to the original side and said to Congress, have a nice day, see you later, announced the decision, changed the course of American history. It didn't happen, and these justices now know it. Finally. So that's what we're running into here with these, especially Alito and Thomas, but they're training the Trump appointees, and if they retire with the Republican winning the presidency in 2 years, they'll retire, get much younger ones in there, and we're going to be good for the duration here. And now they can go a lot faster than they've been going. Thank goodness it's in the right direction. And now it's starting to filter down to the lower courts. And on that point, I have an interesting thing. It just happened to me this year. My quasi family got evicted, and the whole thing was a disaster from day one. It's a long story, and I put in a 48-page unopposed motion, which I think you have, Mary, that I have with exhibits. And they, the attorney for the other people who had the burden of proof in the trial court, I handed it to him, and I said, here you go, pal. We know you can't answer 2 paragraphs. He didn't make any attempt to do it. They got evicted on that basis, and I was prohibited from coming in there. Oh, the one thing I did do, by the way, in this case, because the judge, quote unquote, denied this unopposed motion, one word, denied. I get in there on the record, private attorney general demanding a factual foundation and legal basis. Didn't say 2 words. What do we have there? State Bar Association judge ruling in favor of a State Bar Association attorney. What the hell is this? I filed
Totally
in federal.
unlawful and illegal, and they do it every day on every
Oh, I
single
know. I get it. And I'm ready for them because I filed in the local federal district court here, what looks like a federal district court, but I filed in an Article 3 circuit court. That's the U.S. Supreme Court saying it. Ex parte quote 109 U.S. 566.
Wait a minute. I spent 18 months looking for an Article 3 court. And when you really look at it, and I was in uh, snail mail communication with the Supreme Court clerk, there is no Article 3 court in the Supreme Court building. There is none. Then, if you look up Mukini 303, you'll find that the legislature passed a law stating that any court whose name begins with the United States is not an Article 3 court. So there is no Article 3 court that will claim original jurisdiction because the only Article 3 court that's available now is the U.S. Court of CIT, International Trade in New York, New York, and they refused to claim original jurisdiction. So then when you look and search, you'll find that to fulfill Article 3, one Supreme Court with a small o and a small s and a capital C, to find that court, you have to look in Amendment 7. And Amendment 7 is in the Constitution because The Constitution exists because of the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, and that identifies who the players are. So there has been no law since March 1861 federally. It does not exist. There is none. So there has been no law since then, and there has been no Congress assembled since 1860 when South Carolina seceded from the Union. So the only way we can get back to law federally is for each one of the 33 states to return their states to a constitutional Republican form of government, because you can't have a United States until you have the United States of America in Congress assembled to call the United States to action. The United States is owned by and created by, with an apostrophe S at the end of America, the United States and the Constitution. So what we say is, we on Oregon have formed our social compact, and we have returned Oregon to a constitutional Republican form of government. And the only way that we have been able to find to do it is if you can implement ex parte Milligan and eliminate martial law, because the feds have changed every court to an admiralty martial law court, thereby denying all of us from the Supreme Court down, denying all of us an Article 3 court. But when you read the Constitution, it tells you you make it yourself, because you're required to have an Article 3 court as close to the county where it took place as possible. That does not mean the U.S. Federal District Court of Portland or Minnesota. That means that the people on their county must do their own Article 3 court. Then, when you read what the Supreme Court said when they read Article 4, the Supreme Court said the federal government is not required to provide a constitutional Republican form of government on each state. I rest.
Wow, that's another interesting area that we both know something about. Now, the court has only ruled one time on that issue, and you probably know the case, Luther v. Borden from 1850, 7 Howard 1. They called it a political question. At that time, it probably was. It's not going to be when I get to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they're going to understand why. Because if we don't
But
have that Republican form of government, then that means Article 4, Section 4 must have been repealed by the 14th Amendment, and you can throw in Article 1, Section 9 and 10, which prohibit bills of attainder, the taking of life, liberty, or property without judicial process. The court hasn't made a serious ruling on that issue since Cummings v. Missouri in 1867. That's not accidental. These justices on the court know it.
yes, and it was 1867, and it's not law, and it's not legitimate. It isn't. We haven't had anything legitimate since March 1861 federally.
Oh
All
yeah,
of
well, I
these,
get that and all what you're saying, and
all of these Supreme Court justices that have been appointed, they were appointed illegitimately. If you look up in Black's law, and a lot of people don't like it, but that's what's used. And if you look up in Black's law under de facto, it will tell you a paragraph full of information about how it's there and you have to respect it. But then it says, comma, it is illegal, and illegitimate. And that's what we're dealing with. Are you aware of John Darash and the National Liberty Alliance?
National Liberty Alliance. I don't think so. Go ahead. I'll make a note here.
The NLA, National Liberty Alliance. Uh, they're on the web. He's got, I don't know, 6 to 10,000 paying members. Uh, he's filing from their, what did he call it? The Unified United States Grand Jury. And that is, to me, absolutely ridiculous. I read a book recently. It was, and I'm going to get this wrong, but close. It was the grand jury from 1364 or 1334 to 1941. And it was, I don't know, 250 pages. A friend of mine sent it to me digitally. He has the hard copy. And the grand jury is the key to American common law. And people that try to go back past, uh, say 1664 or 1670, anything prior to that is English common law based on the king. Well, we don't have any royalty here. The 13th Amendment took care of titles of nobility until Lincoln and his group took it out and put in the current 13th and 14th, neither of which were ratified. They're totally bogus,
Yep.
and we're dealing with that.
Yeah, we
You
all agree on that.
Yeah.
you cannot file a case into a into a de facto court in the United States or any state. You can't file one there if you're a man or a woman. They have no facilities to try a man or a woman. They
Bunch of crap.
have no jurisdiction.
Yep.
And they only assume or presume jurisdiction. Have you read the 12 presumptions in law?
I have the 12 presumptions by the American Bar Association.
Yes.
Now, I just want our viewers to know, and this is a bomb I'm about to drop, but the American Bar Association, according to congressional records of 81st Congress, Section 3123, states the American Bar Association is an international criminal syndicate of the Communist Party.
Of course. Yes, I know that one. And it's absolutely true. And the Supreme Court went communist uh, in 2020.
Oh, wow. Hey, I just want to interrupt just for a sec. I want to show our viewers that also in congressional records, and you can find it's June 13th, 1967, pages 15641 to 15646. It says 6 distinct separate times that the American people, the 14th Amendment has never been ratified and that the American people have been hoodwinked.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what you
Just part
have,
of the hoodwink.
yeah, and so you have a Congress that's acting like this, masquerading, trying to uphold this facade that the 14th Amendment was ratified and that it's all legit and there's really US citizens. But if you go, a U.S. citizen is, I believe, codified in Statutes at Large, Volume 2, Section 153, and it states clearly that the only way you can be a U.S. citizen is if you took an oath to support and defend the 1871 United States Corporate Charter, Constitution, that is. And we know that that's ridiculous. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, guys.
Well, yeah, but you're a U.S. citizen if you live in Washington, District of Columbia.
Well, if you were born there or
No,
Guam.
or just live there.
Oh,
If
that's
you're
real.
there, yeah, if
I
you're
thought you had to
there
be
on
born
the
there.
land, no, if you're there on the land, then they can make the presumption and make it stick that you're a U.S. citizen. Now, here's something a lot of people don't comprehend. a man or a woman can expatriate from any jurisdiction, venue, status, or standing to that of a man or a woman with their offspring, with their children, on the land and soil of the state and territory that they're on, without ruler and without subject. They are sovereign. Now, if that claim is made and you sign it, preferably in red with the thumbprint, and you have two witnesses that do it, then you have living testimony with two witnesses, and there is no stronger document in law. It just doesn't exist, and that's whether it's de facto or de jure. And we haven't had de jure except on Oregon since 1861. Now, yield.
Right, well, entirely possible, but I take a little bit of a different view here in that if you're not familiar with the case called Windsor v. McVeigh, 93 U.S. 274, I'll send you some quotes from the U.S. Supreme Court.
What year was that,
They
Bill?
talk about what?
What year was that, McVeigh?
1866.
Okay, so that was after the militia takeover by the American Bar Association, effectively, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
but this
So
is prior to the 14th Amendment for what that may or may not be worth. That I can prove a cappella off the top of my head to a jury that was never ratified. It's simple, as you probably are well aware of what happened there and all that they went through. So that's the only jurisdiction they think they have, subordinate corporate citizens. That's it. And they have to prove it when the statute, for example, says no person shall drive a vehicle without a license. They have to prove you're a person, capital letters, corporation. They can't do it, and they won't do it. A vehicle is in interstate commerce, and the Supreme Court has ruled that those commerce clause powers are closely associated with the admiralty jurisdiction. Cases,
Absolutely.
New Jersey Steam v. Merchants Bank, 6 Howard 44. Admiralty, the framers recognized that as a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws. No state courts can exercise it. Where the hell
Agreed.
are we?
I have a question for you both. When did we, the people, the actual original people that did, built this republic, when did we ever delegate or authorize any authority whatsoever to Congress to create a municipal citizen or a municipality for that matter?
Oh, it never happened.
Never happened.
Absolutely. And by the way, the definition now of citizen, Bouvier's Law Dictionary, I'll send you this one too. Uh,
1858.
a person that has the right to vote for all offices in government and who is competent to take on all offices in the gift of the people.
But
Let's
remember, you
assume
just
we're
said the
incompetent
person.
today.
They're talking about persons. They're not talking about people. These de facto states have tons of persons, but they have no people. Go ahead, Ron.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, wait a minute on that one. We have a Black's Law first edition, 1891. We also have a Black's Law fifth edition. We also have a Black's Law sixth edition and a Black's Law 11th edition. And if you take those books and you look up something like de jure or de facto, or you look up something like counsel, Counsel, and you look up counsel and you start in 1891 and you finish in Black's 11, you'll find out that they changed the definition from one to the other. What starts out, there's no mention in Black's 1 of attorney or lawyer, no mention of it. But in Black's 11, you must be a bar attorney to be counsel. And that's what they do when they deal with us all across the board. So I have to bring up one thing to you. I was being tried in the Beaverton Municipal Court for driving without a driver's license. And I had already gone through a magistrate and a bar attorney sitting in a black robe without any bona fides at all. And I was now in front of the judge of that municipal court. And he said, if you say the word jurisdiction one more time, I will find you in contempt of court and put you in jail. So I didn't say jurisdiction anymore. I just didn't want to go through that hassle because he would do it. And then he said to me, after I quoted the Supreme Court like you guys have just now, he says, I make the decisions of what is law in my court. And then a little bit later on, he said, if you don't like what I just said, take it up with the Court of Appeals. And I did 20 days in Washington County Jail and a year and a half probation. So it doesn't make any difference if you cross the bar into their territory. You just about anything is liable to happen to you. And if you don't cross the bar, there's a guy named Terry Tressel that is now dead that was the foreman of a Supreme, pardon me, he was the foreman of a grand jury in Florida. And he tried to lead the grand jury, and the district attorney had him arrested. And when he showed up in court, the judge said Terry Tressel, and he stood up in the audience and would not cross the bar. The judge said to the bailiff in the court, there's a warrant for his arrest. Arrest him whenever you see him. The judge would not recognize Terry Tressel standing in the audience in the courtroom. They arrested him, they tried him, they put him in prison, and he died there. There is no justice in any court in the United States unless it is an Article 3 court that we did ourselves with an Amendment 7 jury that we did ourselves. Other than that, you cannot find remedy in the United States. Now, you.
Yeah, here in California, and we have it in black and white, original Constitution. And just real quickly, I want to tell you, I've got my own personal documents from the California Supreme Court and the Assembly. The Supreme Court dismissed my non-statutory federal writ of habeas corpus in one sentence. The questions you ask are beyond the jurisdiction of California courts since they appear to raise federal issues. They don't have federal questions jurisdiction? And the kicker here is the justices didn't say it. If they had, they'd be all out there comfortably ensconced next to cell 2455 in San Quentin on death row. The Supreme Court calls that treason to the Constitution, and I agree with them. Cohen's v. Virginia, 6 Wheaton 264, 1818. And the current justices have cited that case several times. They know what the hell is going on here. So I have that. I have a letter from the Assembly from Kevin Mullen, who just got elected to Congress, for what that may be worth, saying the same thing and noting this decision was by the deputy clerk of court. They never heard of separation of powers, delegation of authority. At the same time, my friend Adam, who's had his case in the Supreme Court, and we'll talk more about that later, got a FOIA request answer from the Secretary of State, the office that would know, and said, no, there's no evidence the Constitution of 1849 has been repealed.
Exactly.
That being true, Article 2, Section 1, what does it say? The people of the state of California, 3, white, male, 21, no apologies. What does it say? Article 6, Section 1, California District Court, constitutional common law court recognized contemporaneously by the California Supreme Court, ex parte nolos, 3 Cal 500. And then and also says that the county clerk is the ex officio clerk of that court. We have it You should certainly have it in Oregon, and every one of the 33 states should have it. It may not be with the county clerk, but that certainly makes sense. And I'm going to be trying to get the Supreme Court in Washington to order this bastard to file our documents there. No forms, no fees, nothing. That's the
Well,
judicial court. And if we don't have one of those, Article 1, Section 9 and 10 come into play. Bills of attainder. Where's our court? It's not there.
your
Unless the
court
14th.
is where you say it is.
Yeah. When we show up, it's our court. That's exactly right. When we come in there, no matter what else it may otherwise be, and that's what the Supreme Court said in Windsor v. McVeigh.
We
They
say
talk
it
about that.
takes we say it takes 3 to make your court. Your court and 2 witnesses.
Because you're a
Yeah.
competent court of jurisdiction.
Well, the
Yes.
witnesses would help, but I go in there and set unopposed records in that trial court, quote unquote, aka administrative tribunal, and now I'm setting them up to be charged with acts of treason. And that's the Supreme Court, Collins v. Virginia. What did they say there? The court, must exercise jurisdiction if it has it, but it can't exercise jurisdiction if it doesn't. The one or the other is treason. And these
Yes.
justices know this case.
Yes, and they don't care.
Yep.
They absolutely don't care. They have not cared in recent history since they said hanging chads were causing the problem in the election, and they gave the election to Bush.
Bush, yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that part. But now we have justices for the first time in 90 years. I haven't seen anything like this. They're acting like me. They're talking like
I
me
think it's an
from the
act.
same sources.
Okay, may I
Yeah.
interrupt? Sorry. I just want to say here's my thought process. I was listening to this guy named the informant one day, and he was saying that they brought up in a case, it was a federal case. They tried to use, oh God, don't let me fart. King John, with the barons held the knife to his throat because they didn't want to pay the barons didn't want to pay the Pope all that money. What was that?
Magna Carta.
Magna Carta thing.
Yeah, that's the one.
So the Magna
1215.
Carta was repealed because why? Because a sovereign cannot, even if we're sovereign without subject, cannot be forced to sign under duress. So when Lincoln reconvened Congress under a barrel of a gun, that was reconvening a free people under duress, was it not?
Correct.
You agree, Bill?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that certainly was. There's no
So,
question
so
about
is
that.
it safe to say, based on just that principle and analogy alone, that every single act since Lincoln has been an act of treason by way of executive order, and they are only acting in their acts with all their actors, and maybe that's why Lincoln got shot in a theater, because it was some signal to the people that this is all an act?
I agree with everything you just said.
Yeah, I generally do as well. That's exactly what's happened here. But it
Yes,
just seems like to me, with recent events here, they can't be making the citations, the cases they're citing, without they understand what we're talking about here. Finally,
yeah.
and
Well,
we've got 6 of them right now.
I have a
Yes,
question.
but I have a. Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, sorry, Ron. You first. Go ahead. Sorry.
Bill, what I see you doing is dancing along the line between the de facto and the de jure, and still trying to find remedy in the Supreme Court. And I don't think it's there, and I don't think you can find it there. It isn't there, and to continue looking is frustrating. What I think has to happen is the other 32 states have to follow along what Oregon did so that we can convene a Congress assembled. Until we get to that point, and we have removed martial law, FEMA, from our states, with Ex parte Milligan using their own law against them, until we get to that point, there's no reason to be working with the Supreme Court. It's a bogus organization. I yield.
Well, I think we see it a little differently now. I have problems with the whole thing. Don't misunderstand here. But that said, and when I'm going there, by the way, with this, it's a key Tom, state of California. Extra me, I'm acting in the name of the state of California here, and I'm also acting in the name of the office of the governor, which is vacant. And that's the only office that can bring the attention to the Supreme Court. Article 4, Section 4, Republican form of government.
Okay,
It's
hold on.
not
Hold on.
there.
May I interject just for a second, Bill?
Yeah.
From what I understand, Qui Tam is coming in as the United States, meaning a representative of the actual corporate United States. And ex Real would be coming in as the people of the de jure American Republic. Do we agree on that?
Right. Well, I'll review that part. In any case, I'm
I'm
coming
just,
there.
would we agree on that? So if you were coming in qui tam, you couldn't necessarily try to force a Republican form of government because they are, according to them, a democracy. And I just want to kind of just sidestep for a second and say this. The American Bar Association, from my understanding, owns two 527 corporations. Now, mind you, we just admitted that the American Bar Association is a communist party. Now they're owning two corporations. One 527 corporation is the Republican Party of the democracy that they've created, and the other is the Democratic Party of the democracy for which they created and are operating under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, 10 miles square. Would we agree to that?
Oh, that's a lot of what's going on today.
Yeah, go
There's no
ahead.
Well,
question about that.
Yeah.
I disagree with the 10-mile square
Okay, why?
because you can look at any current map that shows Washington, District of Columbia,
Mhm.
and you'll show that the one I have shows the square for Washington, District of Columbia stops at the river. Everything on the other side of the river is Arlington and not part of the 10-mile square.
So
It
it's
shows you
separated by
that on every single map.
So it's separated by maritime law, and they're trying to usher merchant law upon the people, which is admiralty law. Um, it's just
And
interesting.
have since 1861. Yep, they're doing that.
So, are you guys aware of this guy by the name of Edward Mandell House who convised a plan to put all of the babies born on a pledging system by way of the birth certificate, which is a negotiable instrument, and unbeknownst to the mothers and fathers across this nation, being forced to sign these documents in these hospitals, and they at first they thought they were just putting their baby on record, but they didn't realize they were registering their children, their babies, their newborn, registering their babies to become surety for a national debt on
Chattel.
chattel,
Yeah.
right? And so that is the pledging system and so I'm gonna dive into that just for a quick sec. When the mom and dad write that application on a given name, that given name is in upper and lower. Then what they do at the State Department through Vital Statistics is they take that name, they turn it into an all uppercase name, which is Capitis Diminuitio Maxima under Corpus Juris Secundum, which is a dead civil society law book. They are basically, in my mind's eye, creating hocus pocus, words of art through a stylization. And if you look up a U.S. Styles Manual, page 523, all capital letter names are either a vessel, ship, or a dead entity. They're turning our living babies into dead entities and being made into a vessel by which they're using that to create a 32-ounce weighted bond paper known as the birth certificate to be traded on the stock market, all without our knowledge, all without full disclosure. And this is how they're getting away with this. This is how they're using, charging people in their de facto courts and what have you. We've just uncovered this, mind you. This is absolute ludicrousy, but this is, from what I understand, this is what's happening. So when you go in and become a person, you're no longer a people. It's crazy. Sorry, go ahead, guys.
I'd like to bring one thing to your attention.
Okay.
Can you
Oh,
see this document here?
that's your birth certificate. Yeah.
Yes. My birth certificate is written in cursive.
Okay.
Okay. All that you just declared has no bearing on me and people of my ilk
Okay.
because we're not party to that. And then I think that that is a distraction and it really holds no bearing on returning to a constitutional Republican form of government because it's ancillary to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about another thing that they have done to us. But if you correct the situation, you correct the ancillary things that they have done all the way down the line, and there's hundreds of them, thousands of them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Marriage certificates, driver's licenses,
yes,
real estate licenses, contractors licenses. I
we
guess.
tried that with the. We have a grand jury on Oregon, and we have
Can you
had
tell people what a grand jury is, Ron? They don't know. I guarantee me they don't know.
a grand jury is what the grand jury says it is. That's what it is.
Okay.
And when the people, Article 1, Section 1 on Oregon, decide to do something, then that is what is reasonable and proper because that's what the law is. So then a grand jury, I love a grand jury. It's the only place where the de facto and the de jure come together in one space. The grand jury makes the decisions on whatever is brought to it. On the de jure side, it finds a true bill. And on the de facto side, it finds a presentment. The only way a grand jury comes up with an indictment is when the prosecutor brings an indictment to the grand jury and the grand jury agrees with the indictment and gives it back to the prosecutor. That's an indictment. So when people talk about their grand jury and they're talking about an indictment from the grand jury, they're making a mistake. They're practicing law. They're not being lawful. That is legal. And that can't happen if you're doing a grand jury because the grand jury may not do it right, but they cannot make a mistake. That's the whole deal with the grand jury. It's whatever they decide to do. In that whole book that I read, that's what it turned out to be. I yield.
Hmm. All right. Well, I'm still going through some things here that but it just seems to me if we get back, if we have our local courts in every county that we're supposed to have, and the grand jury would go along with that, obviously, then we don't need federal courts. But the problem is, if we don't have judicial courts anywhere in sight, then they simply repealed Article 1, Section 9 and 10, and maybe all 6 articles of the Constitution with that 14th War Amendment, which, as all of us know, doesn't exist. And, that's where I am
So,
headed here.
so hold on. If they're operating with the 14th War Amendment in place, would you, and it doesn't exist, isn't that fraud? Doesn't fraud vitiate all? Now, let me get back to this grand jury thing. From what I understand the grand jury to be, Ron, the grand jury consists of 25 people, whereas a petite grand jury is 14 people. So I'm saying a grand jury of your peers, because as I understand the Seventh Amendment to be, and I have to tell people, the 1871 Constitution was paraphrased almost exactly from the 1787 Constitution. They just changed the title of it. Would we all agree on that? Because they were
Yeah,
trying
of
to
and
separate a
for.
government.
All right. Well, for the moment,
Well, would you agree on that, Bill and
yeah,
Ron?
for the moment, go ahead.
Okay, so my thinking is this: if they're masquerading to be the government, which I hate that word, but okay, let's use that word. And it's just a corporate charter. It came in by way of fraud in 1871. Its only jurisdiction and venue is 10 miles square, Guam, Puerto Rico, Mariana, Samoan Islands. And what I see them doing is creating a person by way of birth certificate, which has a representative within the District of Columbia. So in order to in order to actually serve your person to drag you into their court, they actually have to serve your representative in DC to even be able to deal with the person, because the person exists in DC only by way of fraud, by way of that birth certificate. I'm trying not to get off point here. My point being is an article, the Seventh
Well,
Amendment, that says in suits at common law where controversies exceed $20, we have a right to a trial by jury of our peers, not to be re-examined in any court in America. That means there's no such thing as appellate courts. Is that correct? Would you agree?
No, you made a couple of mistakes in your recitation.
Okay, go ahead.
Uh, no appeal except by rules of common law.
Okay.
Okay. And then there's no word peers in the Seventh Amendment.
Okay, where did I read that? By trial by jury of your peers. I mean, I
Yeah.
thought they had to
Yes.
be our peers.
No, they write that stuff all over the place.
Okay.
Just like they write the preamble. They write the preamble and they put it there, and people assume that it is legitimate. There is no lawful ratified preamble. It's just a color of law make pretty.
Okay.
And that's what peers is.
So it was never ratified by the people, is what you're saying.
What
Well, the preamble
yes,
or the 1871 Constitution at all. That's just a corporate charter.
that's
And
right.
it took a long time for us to figure out what the hell these American Bar Associates did, but they had help with the international bankers over there. And from what I understand the Republic was fashioned to protect us from international bankers, international lawyer attorneys, and that we held our common law courts with our grand jury, 25 of us who would assemble, and then we would declare and say what law was and who was guilty and all that. So that was 25 actual people, not 25 attorneys coming together forming a grand jury and indicting you, whatever, under their. Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
On the grand jury part,
Yeah.
someplace between 19 and 25 is a legitimate grand jury.
Okay.
25 comes from the barons in the Magna Carta.
Okay.
And that's British, and I no truck with that at all. American common law, we've got plenty of that.
Okay. And where would you find American common law? Because a lot of people don't know where to find that. Can you help us with that?
Yeah, put it on DuckDuckGo, American common law. It'll come up.
Hmm.
It's
Okay.
there.
So I was speaking to somebody and they said that the common law actually comes from the book of Acts in the Bible.
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of it goes back that far. Yes.
Okay. So
And before the Bible, they had Hammurabi.
that's right. So this
They've
is
been
nothing new under the sun. Is that correct?
No, they've been doing it for a really long time, and I don't know, and nobody that I know knows uh, how many iterations of this earth has gone through uh, a flood, a fire, or some catastrophe, or the realigning of the North and South Pole so that we have another catastrophe, and every so many thousands of years, we start all over again. I don't know, but it sure has a lot of convincing evidence for that.
I'd have to agree with that. Yeah. I mean, So the only thing I'm trying to get people to understand is common law, where that comes from. Now, I read somewhere that natural law. Okay, what was it? Neal versus Cruden, and this was before they the Judiciary Act, which is another treasonous act, was passed. I can't stand the judiciary. Don't get me started on that nonsense. Um, but at any rate, Neal versus Cruden, man is not subject to other man's laws and institutions, only to the law of nature. Would you agree with that? Natural
Yeah,
law. Would you agree, Bill? The natural law trumps even common law.
Well, that certainly sounds right here too.
So I want to take something that's going on in America all across this country right now. We have mothers and fathers with offspring, with their babies, and we got CPS workers showing up with these unconstitutional sheriffs stealing babies all across America with no court of record. Now, this is absolutely insane to me. The fact that they are literally trafficking of persons and trafficking of children by way of these baloney courts that they're trying to pull over on the people these days. These communists who are renting out our courthouses, who have no right to even be there. And all I'm thinking to myself is, my God, I mean, you take a cup from a mama bear, you about to find out what's going to happen, right? I mean, doesn't natural law supersede any of that other law? I mean, mothers and fathers have a right to their own babies, for God's sakes, man. What are we even talking about? Would you guys please elaborate or say something to that, please?
I agree.
Bill?
never seen a birth certificate for me. I have a certificate of live birth from the hospital I was born in, which, wouldn't you know, on the side of the street I was born happened to be the state of Maryland. The other side was the District of Columbia, if that would have mattered. More to the point, I have my paternal family Bible. It goes back to 1855. And early on, before I knew a lot of what I know now, I brought that into a contempt, and they're trying to find me like $2,000 for practicing law without a license, helping somebody in a traffic court. And the judge comes in, ruffles some papers, looks up, sees me obviously opening the family Bible. Bang! Down comes that gavel. Have a nice day. Don't do it again. See you later. I can
Lucky
prove
you.
I'm not subject to their jurisdiction.
You know, I think many people don't really realize that Patrick Henry once said, "Give me liberty or give me death." And he said that after having seen a man flanked to death for not having a license. And that is why the American framers forged America to become America, because they were dealing with such oppression from the King of England. And it's I don't dare call them noblemen, because there's nothing noble about men with no honor, which is what I see happening in these courts today. I personally have 5 judges and 2 New York State Supreme Court justices protecting a child rapist in New York, who's a New York State corrections officer. And when the chief of police called him out on it, they've canned him after 30 years of service and forced his resignation. And all he'd put out to the American people is, you know what, I took that Constitution to be serious, and he's a good man. His name's Anthony Alvarez from Elmira, New York. So kudos for Anthony Alvarez. I told him, you need to go run for sheriff and become a constitutional sheriff, Anthony. But I mean, this is the kind of crap we're dealing with today in these courts. And I gotta run. I gotta agree with you, because I've been at this 30 plus years, and Bill, I haven't seen justice in these courts, and I don't know anybody who's getting justice in these courts. And I don't think these are the people's courts. And we've got, look at, I'll get into this later about this one judge I called out for treason, but it was very simple. I was challenging jurisdiction in the state of, well, the Commonwealth of Virginia. And first question, I came in special appearance, bound him to his oath, pursuant Article 6, Sections 1, 2, and 3, bound him there too, accepted his oath, bound him there too, and then basically asked him, are you a bar member? Are you a bar attorney? Or do you have a bar card? And for which he said yes. And I said, okay, well, and then he started to proceed without proving jurisdiction. I called him out for treason, and then he muted me. So effectively stopped my right of speech, my freedom of speech, the most basic liberty on the freaking planet. I mean, come on, man. This is what we're dealing with these days. I mean, that's just simple terminology to understand. And after he muted me, he told the whole everybody in there, he's like, well, she's playing chess, but we're playing checkers, haha. So let's continue, and that's all the while, Bill, while your Supreme Court over there was quoting Cohen v. Virginia. That's crazy. I mean, I'm sorry, you guys, but I just don't know anybody who's getting justice in these courts these days.
We're getting close. And this, by the way, the Cohen citation only goes back to 2020. So, and they've done it in the
2021.
past.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's
Yep.
amazing, because what they're doing now, and you can't cite that case. And by the way, the case that I'm putting in the original jurisdiction cites a case no one's ever heard of called Ex parte Comezo Colado, 317 U.S. 69. He gets an original writ there, but it's very rarely issued because he's Japanese. He'd been in the country 40 years. This is the 1940s. And he was working out here in California as a long term, and he wasn't getting paid. He couldn't find any courts to file in. He filed in the U.S. Supreme Court, which granted an original writ of habeas corpus because they were treating him like an undocumented enemy alien, which is exactly what they think we are. They're going to get this reference in the U.S. Supreme Court. We don't have any courts. Where are they? If you tell us where it is, we'll file there. No problem.
Yeah, right.
That's where I think we have an unprecedented window of opportunity here. From what I'm seeing and reading, and I read between the lines pretty good. I've been doing it for 40 years. And this case, Texas v. California, came up 3 years ago, June. And what looked like a two-justice dissent by Alito and Thomas, because they refused to file Texas documents against California. These are states, right? And they said, wait a minute, in effect, reading between the lines, one of two things has happened here. Either the Supreme Court has the power to amend the Constitution, which I thought comes under Article 5, or states don't mean states. That's the crown jewel of everything I do, and they understand this. There are no states. Without that, there's consent of the government.
Are you talking about little s states where the people actually ratified the states in the republic? Are you talking about capital S state, which is an overlay of DC incorporated? Or are you talking about state of states all caps, which is just plain corporation? I mean, what state are we talking about?
Let me make it clear. I'm talking about sovereign, independent states, small s, admitted into this union. They're not there anymore.
Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, they are. They're sitting on the bench. I read somewhere, and I can't recall where, that the last meeting of the Congress assembled under the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union was attended by one man. Since then, the Congress assembled under the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, which the Constitution is just one of the articles. That's where it is. Any place else doesn't exist. And that place has been vacant since March 1861. And that's what we got to return to. I'd like to make a small point here.
Please.
People talk about the Treaty of Paris, and a lot of people are equating the Treaty of Paris to an important document within our nation, as it brought about the Northwest Ordinance, and all the states that came from that all came from the Treaty of Paris. But you can take your search engine and type in Treaty of Paris, and with a little looking, you'll find the first page of the Treaty of Paris. I won't try and quote it here, but I'll give you what it says. When you read the first page of the Treaty of Paris, it says who the king is. And the king was the King of England, he was the King of France, and he was all of these titles and all of the everything, and he was the king of the United States of America. It's written right there in the first page in that treaty that the King of England is the King of the United States of America. Then you read a little further, and you'll find that four esquires signed that document. Now, an esquire is a title of nobility. The only way you can get an esquire is by accepting a title of nobility, usually offered by the British Accreditation Registry, which usually is locally represented by the Oregon State Bar or the Illinois State Bar. On Oregon, you're entitled to, when you register with the bar, to be a JD, a Juris Doctor, or you can be an esquire. They give you the chance either way. My thought is, how in a one class society of the United States of America is there any organization that's authorized to give a title of nobility? How is that possible? That's for starters. Excuse me. The next thing is, when you get back to the title, to the Treaty of Paris, one of the four esquires was John Jay. He was the first Supreme Court Justice of the United States. He performed treason in the Treaty of Paris. They gave the United States back to the king after the war, and I don't know where I got this, but what I remember is the king said, "I don't care about the people. They can be whatever they want. The lifespan is relatively short. Who cares? But the land is still mine." And they agreed. And he, with the Treaty of Paris, resumed title of the United States and all of his former colonies. When you, excuse me, when you look at the rest of this document, you find that John Adams was also an esquire, and you find that Benjamin Franklin was also an esquire. Now, these are founding father types that have committed treason in the Treaty of Paris, and you can see it on the first page. Then they take this document and they proceed to try and govern us with it. And we talk about everything that's happened since March 1861 and sine die, but it goes back way further than that. It goes back a really long ways. When the people that actually performed the revolution, and I have two, father and son, that I'm direct descendant from, that fought for New York in that war. When you have that small a percentage of people that brought about this miracle of the document that they could write, these guys couldn't live up to the document that they wrote. They just don't have the courage and the stamina that it's necessary to have to live up to the documents that they wrote. And that's okay. They're just people. But you got to go with the document. You got to go with what is real to the best of our ability. And that's where we are on Oregon. We're doing the very best we can to make this as lawful as we possibly can. And we're doing it with really difficult documents because there is no statehood documents available for Oregon. I don't believe you can find them for any of the states. Now, I went to the Secretary of State with 4 other men, and they refused to give it to us. They made the appointment and refused to give it to us. I went to the National Archives and I went to the Library of Congress. There are no statehood documents available for Oregon. Can't find them.
Hmm.
They will not provide them. So how can you deal with stuff like that?
Bill, you have any comment to that?
Yeah, I'm just listening. Well, among other things, if Oregon was admitted pursuant to Article 4, Section 3, there certainly should be some official records there that would be available. Congress, the act of admission, and the date, like California on September the 9th, 1850. I've not had occasion to look, but you would expect.
Shoot. Bill, you're freezing up, buddy. Hold on, you're freezing up. There you go. Okay. Go ahead.
Bill, we found the same thing about Oregon. We can find where the president signed the papers to make Oregon a state. We can find that. We can find all kinds of references that it happened, but you cannot find the authentic copy of the Oregon Constitution that was accepted by Congress assembled. That's one of the documents that you must have. And you must have the United States of America's apostrophe S Constitution, first law of the land. That is the document that must be available because it takes those two documents to make a contract. So they tell us there's a contract, but they cannot prove that there is a contract. If there's a contract, I should be able to read it.
Good point.
There is no contract. There's only supposition.
Bill?
Breaking up there for a second. Okay, well, I don't know the case in California on that particular. But certainly what I do know is in the current Constitution, the people of the state of California in whose name all official acts are done are conspicuously undefined. Not only that, we're systematically excluded from all departments of government. Where's the consent of the governed here?
And why don't you
see
give
it.
us your spiel about the consent of the governed, and if we're incompetent, when were we ever? Go ahead, give us our incompetent spiel. Go ahead, Bill. I love that.
Oh, yeah, well, that's the whole big deal, and all of you, Ron, too, the moment you hit the door of one of the courthouses, we're presumed incompetent on who knows what factual foundation and legal basis. If you don't have it, I'll send you a copy of the Georgia probate code that sets it forth. You'll have the equivalent there. We do here, I think it's in welfare and institutions. Incompetence. If that's true,
Damn it. It's freezing up. Hold on, Bill. Go oh, go ahead. Say it again, Bill. If that's true.
yeah, then how do we regain competence every 2 or 4 years on election day? And how is it that second and third graders these days are competent to decide that they're a transgender entity, whatever the hell that is?
And when were you ever competent to become incompetent and competently waive all your rights to become incompetent?
Yeah, that's Johnson v. Zerp. That's the U.S. Supreme Court. Voluntary, knowing, and intelligent waiver of rights. You can't do it.
No, it's stupid. And those are the
The
12
juries are going to get
presumptions.
this. I'm never going to see a jury, but they're going to get this if I do. Give me 10 minutes. They won't even have to
I'll
go
tell
into
you
the
what,
back room to
if
deliberate.
you in the audience, you go take the time to look up the 12 presumptions of these bar attorneys. I hope you get mad enough to do something about it, because this is the insanity for which they are literally storing people as cargo in their privatized prison systems today. But I want to get back to the Treaty of Paris just for a second. In 1783, I believe that's when that treaty was supposedly signed, right? Right, Ron?
Yes.
1783. Okay.
Probably.
Yeah, so 1783 was the first war that America ever engaged in. Are you guys aware of that? It was with the Middle East over oil. Now, America, according to Benjamin Franklin, owned a lot of money to these supposed people that had lent us money to fight the Revolutionary War. And I once heard this saying, "All is fair in love and war." I don't know, sounds about right. But at any rate, my point being, you said that John Jay committed treason while signing that. Well, if it's treason, then it's fraud, then it's just vitiated, is it not? And then again, you know, I don't think that's that just can't be correct. I think that's just some bullshit that Alan Weishaupt threw out to try to throw a monkey wrench in the American people's declaration of sovereign independence. And then again, I want to talk about that Declaration of Independence, that first document that was ordained and established by the will of the people and the framers at that time. That document was ordained and established on July 4th, 1776, right alongside, now I want you to listen to this, right alongside the 1776 Constitution for Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which was at that time the nation's capital. I want you to think about that for a minute. Not only did the last ratification of the people was the 13th Amendment, which was no titles of nobility, which you just touched on, Ron, but that is when the bar, all these communists, because nothing's changed. I mean, even Christ in the Bible speaks of lawyers and attorneys and woe unto you attorneys, blah, blah, blah. They have always been waging war against God, its creation, righteousness, anything just and anything lawful in a natural sense, in my opinion. What I think happened is they started the 1812 War of 1812, to burn all of our archives, all of our national archives, all of our documents. They wanted to start looting and scrubbing and burning all of our documents. I can't personally find the 1776 Constitution of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I've been looking everywhere for it. From everything that I've read, there are 17 correct, true, and original copies, and I'm scouring the earth looking for them. I want to see that 1776 Constitution. I see the National Archives they got. That's a bunch of bullshit. Everything I've read from them is bullshit. I don't know who these freaking communists think they are. They really think we're stupid, and we're not. Okay. And we have got to deal with this, because this is a major issue. I don't even think the 1787 Constitution holds as much weight as the 1776 Constitution, which was ordained and delegated the day that the Declaration of Independence was. And I yield.
Yeah, well, another interesting thought there. You said about, where is the Supreme Court? There are those who think that it may be the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, given how the nation started off, and the nation's capital was in Philadelphia. And I'll be looking more into that. I'll get back to you. That could very possibly be the remedy that we're looking for here.
Go ahead, Ron.
Here's a small point on Pennsylvania. To become an attorney or a lawyer in Pennsylvania, you don't get the permission from the bar. You get it from the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. They determine who passes and who doesn't pass, and who gets to practice law and who doesn't get to practice law. And you do not have to be a member of the bar, or you don't have to be an esquire on Pennsylvania. You can be a lawyer without any allegiance to the bar and no need for a FARA card. I yield.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of
go
people
ahead.
think that an attorney is a lawyer. A lawyer means learned in law. An attorney is an esquire and a title of nobility and holds a bar card. That's my understanding of it. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, now this is something we've been discussing earlier about the Treaty of 1783. And there are those that think we might have got sold out, by the way, going back to the Magna Carta in 1215. 2 years prior to that, where King John pledged all his goods to the Pope in order to be assured he gets into heaven. And it seems like the Vatican City may come into play here quite a bit. And my studies tell me they do. If you ever read a book called The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, it was a hell of a movie by Ron Howard, too. That kind of thing. 2,000 years, coming from Vatican City. And with the recent passing of the prior Pope, those two popes didn't get along. And I wonder who had the best of it there. I think it might be Pope Francis, the one that's still around. I'll get back to you when I do more research on that. But in that regard, by the way, take notice that John Paul I was in office 30 days because he wanted to change the church and put it in there and make it for the poor people like it was supposed to be. He didn't even last a month. And then they get John Paul II in there, that War Shearer from Poland, and everything got back to normal, the Vatican Bank and all this crap and this, that, and the other. And that started out with the Vatican Act of 1928, where there was a significant change in the church. And they may have been involved in a lot of other things, possibly the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. I've got a book on that I don't have readily available, but I've heard that, and it makes sense when you think about it. And I was not untroubled by Lincoln, by the way, but he did say in a private letter, and I've got a 11-volume book thing called Messages and Papers of the Presidents. This one's not in there. He wrote a letter to a friend in November 1864 and said he was grateful that the war was coming to an end, and it was obvious it was in that time frame. But he said we have a greater enemy on the horizon, the New York bankers. If that came to public attention, that would explain events in Ford's Theater now, wouldn't it? And they thought they had their guy in the sack there, Andrew Johnson. Lincoln had appointed him as military commander of Tennessee in 1862. He turned out to be the greatest president we've ever had and the last one lawfully in office. If I had read his veto of the Reconstruction Act in 10th grade, my life would have been different 50 years ago. They don't want us to know any of that. Wow. I yield.
It's interesting. In America, on American soil, these Catholic churches, they hold territory for what's called a diocese. Okay. Some people call it a parish. Actually, in Catholicism, it's called a diocese. Now, every diocese, which is a territory of the Catholic Church that's erected usually downtown by the courthouse, they appoint a bishop for every diocese. A lot of people don't know this, but this Administrative Procedures Act that was put forth by these bankers, I mean bar attorneys, it was a treaty of 1946, I believe. They had to have equal protections. So they also at the same time put forth something called the Uniform Enforcement Act of Foreign Judgment, because they were foreign to us. So I personally have tried to put in a foreign judgment statement. They should have honored it. I assure you these people do not operate in honor. I assure you they don't operate legally. They don't operate lawfully. I assure you that the judges oaths that they use a nom de guerre, meaning war name. They sign their orders with a different name than what is on that oath. They'll say, for instance, let's say Judge Patrick Francis McRae. He signs Judge Patrick F. McRae. That is not the same name. People are being misled. They do this so that they don't have to hold accountability for the harm, injury, and loss they are creating and causing to these people who, unbeknownst to them, walk in these courthouses, think they're going to get a fair shake, and the only shake they're getting is a hand behind closed doors. But this Administrative Procedures Act, unfortunately, is an administrative process that is being held and orchestrated by the Holy See over there in Vatican, Rome. I just want to know, like, when did I ever invite Rome and the Vatican into America, into my living room, into my family's lives, up my vagina? Like, when did that ever happen?
I doubt if it did.
Yeah, I'm so sick of Rome. I'm so sick of this. The Civil War. Okay, let's talk about that. Civil law was instilled after the Civil War. It's black and white. It's not black and white people. It's black ink on white paper. Okay, the common law was it was a common knowledge of the people. They didn't even have to write it down, for God's sakes. It was so common that people understood common law, right? Would you agree with that? I mean, civil law is written down. It's lex scriptus. It's scribed. So the civil law is like perpetually what became in our courts after the Civil War, because it says and never all of our writing, all of our is this a common law land. And getting back to that Pope one that was just ousted just a minute ago, Kevin Arnett up there in Canada, he put together a whole bunch of people that came together and held common law court, whereby they called out the Queen and the Pope for what had happened up there in Kamloops, Canada, where 800 Native American children, First Nations children, were murdered on Catholic soil within Catholic schools, went missing, were inferno, literally cremated. I went to a Native American film festival in San Francisco, California, where I saw 71-year-old victims who told me I was held down at 12 years old by my arms, and they performed a hysterectomy on the desk in front of all my classmates, and I was never able to have children after that. That's just some of the terrors I've heard by witnesses' mouth, by their own confession with my own eyes. I'm telling you, the things that have gone on in this world by way of these people. Why do you think all these people came to Europe, from Europe to America anyway? They want to get the hell out of there, man. They were that Inquisition over there. They were murdering people. They used to strip you nude, make you walk backwards, is to not give the Pope the evil eye before they would disembowel you. And I yield.
Just to point how I'll get if you don't have it, we have in California, it's in the first volume of California Reports called Report on the Civil and Common Law. There's a lengthy discussion by the San Francisco Bar long before the state bar came in. And they would discuss California was civil law, because remember, we got that from the war with Mexico, and of course, Mexico was controlled by France, which is a civil law nation. So there was some serious discussion, and you read this, and it tells you exactly what it is that we need to know. The only big deal now, by the way, first volume of California Reports, the recently printed volumes we have in California now, these pages are conspicuously absent.
It
They
was
don't
that
want
Treaty
you
of
to know.
Guadalupe. That was the Treaty of Guadalupe, right?
Oh, that's the treaty in 1849, I think. But this goes back to yeah, in the same time frame, I mean, 1850, with the California Constitution. And wouldn't you know, in the recent versions of California Reports, the pages are conspicuously absent. And this edition, by the way, was printed for what it may be worth in Beijing, China.
Interesting.
Could have saved more money with Zhonggang, North Korea, and they got the same democracy we do, right?
Yeah,
They're not
democracy.
there.
Their democracy is a threat to our republic, right, Ron? Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's
so
talk
that's
about
what we're dealing with here. But the truth is what it is, and juries will recognize that if I ever get to see one, and I almost certainly won't.
no, you
But if
almost
I do,
you'll never get your day in court, Bill. I hate to tell you, because we've got Communist Party in our courthouses, renting out our courthouses, which brings me to another point. I've been talking to Bill about this since February of 2021. Check this out. Okay, you know how you guys over in Oregon already, revamped your republic there? You know what I mean? So what if the people revamp the republic and then hold well, I mean, here's an interesting question. Okay, before I go there, do the people have to expatriate, seeing as the 14th Amendment doesn't even exist, number one? And number two, can't they just, through the right of self-determination, declare themselves to be with the republic or with the Constitution, the original Constitution, not the revised Constitution rewritten by the attorneys? But like you said, Bill, you're in California, or on California, 1849. California Constitution was never repealed, so you could stand with the republic through your right of self-determination with the 1849 Constitution, can't you?
yeah, we certainly should be able to do that, especially I think in the U.S. Supreme Court or maybe in Pennsylvania. But we have, and they have burden of proof on everything else, and they can't prove any of it. They've never attempted. My bill of particulars, 14 pages from hell.
Oh,
They
that's great.
can't answer any
You
of it.
got great. All they are is questions, Ron. Just a bunch of questions, and they can't answer two of them. Trust that. So my point is like, so what if we just get together? You know those sunshine laws, right? That are on the books from way back when, or what? What if we got, like, say, 25 people to hold court outside in the court square, live stream it, where we have all these people and say, hey, you know what? We want these Communist Party bar attorneys out of our courts effective immediately. You got 30 days, get the hell out, or we're going to get our sheriff to get you out and forcibly remove you, just like they do to all these people living in their homes, right? Well, now if that sheriff don't go remove those bar Communist Party members from our courthouses, the people's courthouses, we hang that sheriff live in the county, right there in the square. And then we'll get a new sheriff that will uphold the people's will, and the new sheriff can do it. And if he doesn't do it, we hold him accountable. We hang him in the court square. We get somebody brave enough to deputize enough, brave enough women and men to get out there and just get these freaking, it's time to clean house. Go ahead, Bill, Ron. Go ahead.
The only problem I see with that is it's like the frog in the water with the fire under it.
Okay.
You can't get enough people to jump out of the hot water.
You
You
really believe
just
that?
you just can't do it.
Really?
And
You really believe
yeah,
that? You
and
believe the American people's spirit is so downtrodden that they don't know how to exercise their own free will anymore?
yes,
Really?
they have
Yes.
been training. Look, I'm 84 years old. They had me fooled until I was 75. And I'm smart. The Navy tested me and I'm just smart as hell. It
Mm-hmm.
takes a it takes a 68 to get into Mensa and I have a 67.
Okay.
So I'm a smart guy.
I get
And
it.
they had me fooled until I was 75 years old. I would just go along with the illness of cognitive dissonance
Yeah.
since 2001 when I saw the twin towers come down and then I saw building 7 go down and I said, no, wait a minute, that can't be.
Right.
But I just saw it, but that can't be. And then from that time on I knew that I was ill, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to deal with it. And it took me 14 years to wake up. There, there are a lot of people, my next door neighbor of 20 years that I've known really a long time. And I'm
Yeah.
explaining to Peter about what happened on Oregon, how they switched Oregon from a de jure constitutional republic to a de facto corporation. And I'm explaining this to him, and he knows it all. And I says, okay. And he said, when did they do this? And I said, 112 years ago. And he looked at me and he says, I don't want any part of that. I don't want anything to do with that. And he turned around and walked off.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Maybe.
the guy's a graduate of the University of Oregon.
Well,
He
he's
he has
indoctrinated.
he has a responsible position with a major corporation. He's not a dummy, but he's the same as me, cognitive dissonance. I don't want to know about that. Don't ring that bell. I don't want to know. I want to watch the TV in the afternoon and have a little early dinner and take a nap. That's what I want to do. And the whole world's full of them. And then you go around and you say, boy, they've been teaching this to our kids, my kids, since, boy, I don't know when they started it, but
When they started calling them kids because they're Satanists, they want you to believe you're a goat. Meh.
Yeah.
We have sons and daughters.
children,
We don't have kids. Hell, I'm a mama bear. I'd rather call my babies bear cubs than kids. What the hell is this kids nonsense? This is some Disney wicked bullshit. I don't know where that started. Anyway, okay. I hear you. I'm here because I want to make a difference. So Ron and Bill, how are we going to make a difference if we were to really revamp this republic? If we are the last beacon of hope in the world, because I don't want my daughters wearing a burqa. Do you? I don't want to run around wearing a burqa. Do you? Because that's where we're heading. we're heading into Sharia law, because after law emerging comes Sharia law. I'm pretty damn sure of it. And getting back to the Vatican, they have the Black Pope, which pushes the Muslim bullshit, and then they got the white Pope that pushes the Catholic bullshit. None of them are Christian. I mean, and that book is a dividing device. I can't even go there. But my point being, how do we restore the republic? Because from what I understand, like you said, the common law court was that we bring our people together, we hold a court with our people, and we make an order, and that should stand with our signature. If you get 25, 14, 12, whatever signatures with a red seal, that's a court, because we're competent court of jurisdiction. Our court should stand, should it not? Shouldn't our court stand?
It does.
Okay, so tell us how to do it, Ron. And then if we get our states up and going and running back into a republic form of government, and then we take what'd you say, 22 of the 33 states? And can you elaborate on that, please, Ron? Tell us.
I wish I knew the answers to that, but I can tell you what we did.
Okay.
And we have gotten it to the point now where it is time to confront the sheriff, the district attorney, and the presiding judge of the county court. That's the position we are in right now on Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
They have to take a proper oath to a proper constitution. And they have not been doing that on Oregon since 1910. They've had a bogus constitution that they have been taking an oath to.
Yeah.
So that is not an oath.
But they have to, if they take a proper oath, isn't there a proper president that has to swear them in to give them a proper oath? Isn't that correct?
No.
Okay, tell me about a proper oath.
Okay, a proper oath has to be to a proper constitution. And the constitution on Oregon has been bogus since 1910. So when they take their oath now, they say to this constitution, and that's the constitution that is bogus.
And how do we, and I'll tell you how we prove that, ladies and gentlemen. We go to the county, we go to the city, and we go to the state, and we can find DUNS numbers or SAM, unique identifying numbers, to prove that they are operating in a corporate capacity. I have every single state and every single capital's DUNS number operating in this de facto corporate United States. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Ron.
Except Oregon. We found the way to do it, and we did it. Takes 21 days, just like I said in the little paper I read. In 21 days, you tell them in 7 days, 14 days, or 21 days, you will have acquiesced and defaulted to the statements made here, whatever statement you made.
Mm-hmm.
And the one we used on Oregon was, you have broken your oath, you have no honor, and you cannot hold a position of trust. That's the only charge we use on Oregon. We're not interested, our court is not interested in incarcerating or in executing. We're interested in remedy. So
well, here's an idea for remedy for you. Why don't you guys that have already defaulted, these morons that acquiesced, these actors, and go take that default and go ahead and file a claim against their bonds, because those bonds were drafted in 1792, long before the de facto existed. Take your default and go charge their bond, because
there
they're
is no bonds on Oregon.
well, I'm talking
They've
about
converted them all except for 19. They have converted them all to risk management insurance.
risk management liability insurance, but those bonds are subcontracted into a risk management liability insurance. Then you could take that default that you guys have, and make a claim against that insurance. If the insurance doesn't pay out, take it to the Department of Insurance. Now, after that happens, then you can do what is called a writ of quo warranto, and you can dissolve their agency for fraud upon the people and not upholding the Constitution for which they stand, because they are, in fact, actually violating even their own Constitution. Believe that, it's true. They do it all the time, every day, against the people. It's happening. So
They
it's just
do.
an idea. It's an
And
idea. I mean,
we filed a quo warranto with the sheriff to process with Kate Brown,
hmm
the former
communist,
governor of Oregon.
communist,
And
yeah.
yeah, and he won't do it.
Well, then hang him in the square at high noon and get a sheriff in there who will.
Yeah, but you're talking silly talk now.
You think so?
Yeah.
Because I don't see how the people are going to enforce anything if we don't have constitutional sheriffs. Why bother having law at all? You know, really.
Well, it's not dependent upon the sheriff. This is the key, and it's really simple.
Okay, go ahead.
You must do it yourself. Nobody can do it for you, and you cannot do it alone. That's it. There is no more past that. But if you don't do it, it doesn't get done.
Okay.
So when you look at 5 million Oregonians and you tell them, you have to do this.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you that we've been working at it for 4 years, and we have several hundred people that agree and have signed up for our constitutional Republican form of government and our grand jury and trial jury pool.
Mhm.
Yeah. But when you get all done with doing the work, grand jury, trial jury, Article 3, Amendment 7, verdicts, true bills,
Right.
presentments, and you do every single step that you can possibly do
hmm
absolutely correctly. And when you get all done, you have no sheriff out of the 36 that will take a proper oath. And I know that on
For a fact.
Oregon.
Really.
Yeah. There is no one of the 36 district attorneys that will do it. And there's no one of the 36 presiding judges of the county courts that will do it. They are all criminals.
Okay.
And they were all elected to their office in a de jure, pardon me, in a de facto form of government, and they have been since 1910, and they like it. When you talk to Richard Mack, the constitutional Republican,
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
know Sheriff
yeah,
Mack.
yeah,
Yep.
I know him. I've talked to him.
Yep.
I joined his posse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. He has no desire to learn. He's just like my next door neighbor, Peter. I don't want to know. And I have personally taken it to Mac, and he won't do it. He will not listen. He does not want to comprehend that the Supreme Court that told him he could be a constitutional sheriff was a bogus court in a de facto court telling him it was okay for him to be de jure. And he does not want to hear it. He does not want to know that. And neither does anybody else that's in that organization. They're in it because they like it.
They're in it because they have a seat of power and they've got a whole bunch of goons with force guns to force their Nazism upon the people and hold them as cargo and privatize prison systems because they make a lot of money at it. That's what we're
Of
dealing with.
course, yes.
We're dealing with.
So
And back
what we're
blue till it happens to you. I know. We know what's going on, but Unfortunately, the problem is that now they're stealing children off of front porch steps, and this is what concerns me
They
because
have
I
been
am a
doing that
woman,
for
and
a long time.
you know what, and I'm just like, you know what, law is great, but they don't uphold it, and at this point in time, I'm a mother, and I stand under natural law, and that's where I stand. I mean, common law is fabulous, all this other law is fabulous, but let's be honest, they're not even upholding their own law. Let me tell you why. In their de facto law, it says, let me use Virginia for instance, this is most transparent. Virginia Code 59.1-76 says, to be an assigning or successor, you must not initiate any court within you must not initiate any action within any court within the Commonwealth unless and until said certificate, which is the assumed name certificate or doing business as certificate, is filed with the Secretary of State. Meaning, you cannot be an agent of your agency unless and until you have that certificate required filed with the Secretary of State. Like I told you, these people don't even act legally. They don't have these certificates. They're not acting as an agent of their agency. They're acting independently, illegally, unlawfully, and they sign with a bullshit name that doesn't reflect the freaking oath at all, even if they did have some bullshit legitimate oath, which they don't. But let's pretend they did. Okay, again, 81st Congress, Section 3123, the American Bar Association is an international criminal syndicate of the Communist Party. Every single judge in that court, all the way up to the Supreme Court of Virginia, they are absolute freaking communists. Okay, they are bar card carrying members. That's the deal. And they're not acting legally. They're not acting lawfully. They're not assigning their successor of their agency. They're acting in. All they have is force guns and some hoopla written down. That's all they got, and they use it. So I hear you. I hear you, Ron. I hear you loud and clear, buddy. I've been looking into this for a long time. Eventually, I'm going to invite some other people on to join us that have some really interesting other things to share, and I think it's worthy because of the way that everything is unfolded and everything we're uncovering on the back end of this. In the underwriting of these insurance policies and the CRIS registry investment system by which these courts are getting paid on the back end because they believe themselves to be entitled to their charge. You go ahead and read that Virginia Code 59.1-76. It even says these assigning or successors are not even entitled to their charge unless and until that required certificate is filed with Secretary of State. I sat there and I asked a judge to his face, do you have your business name, your assumed name certificate filed with Secretary of State? Oh, we don't follow that statute. I said, oh, okay, let me get my pen. What other statutes don't you follow?
Mhm.
Oh, I mean, that's what we're dealing with. These people are such crooks, such criminals. And as you know, fraud vitiates all, and they are acting like fraud across the board from the 1871 charter of the corporation known as America under Title 28 United States Code 3002, subsection 15A. The United States is a federal corporation, not a government. How do you explain that one? I mean, these people have no clue. So, Ron, we're here to wake them up. They got to wake up now because we can't have our men and innocent women being held as cargo in these privatized prison systems by this Communist Party in its clutches. This has got to stop. We have got to end this. Okay? We love law, but we love good law. Go ahead, Ron.
Uh, I have to leave soon, but
Okay.
my suggestion is contact us at www.orsja.org, and we will do our best to show you how in 21 days you can bring your state or territory to a lawful constitutional Republican form of government with a jural assembly.
Okay.
And
So
I
let's
yield.
okay, just really quick. If let's say that we get all these people on board and let's say we get like 30 of the 31 original states and they all become republic, then what can we do to make the de facto recognize we are now a republic form of government?
They will have recognized that long before we get to that point. They are recognizing it on Oregon right now.
Are they?
They yes, it
Yeah.
kills them, but they're doing it.
Wow.
Uh, we filed 3 amicus curiae briefs into the federal district court in Eugene
Okay.
for one of our members. We filed a claim of cognizance to go with it, and we filed it into their court, their clerk, with proof of filing in their possession. Then they sat down in the courtroom. The judge found out what's going on, and the judge says, "We're going to recess for a while." So they got up and went to the toilet and got a drink. And when they came back, the court was closed. And it hasn't opened up yet. And that was pushing 8 months ago on that case.
Are you serious? Like the whole
Yeah,
court was shut down?
they shut for him.
Oh,
That that court shut down for Mike. Boy, last name won't come. That's embarrassing.
that's okay. That's okay. No,
Okay, so then we have filed claims of cognizance in several other courts, and they will not move past the claim of cognizance.
interesting.
They stop there.
Wow.
So
And you did a writ of mandamus and a writ of press of pay, and you try to force the court to recognize your paperwork and everything.
yeah,
Yeah. Hmm. Interesting.
if you're a defendant, if you're a defendant in a court,
Mm-hmm.
then when you file a document into the court and you have proof that you filed that document into the court, it is in the court of record.
Right.
Okay. So what we do is we have our documents filed into the court by the defendant. So he files his claim of cognizance, his copy of the document we sent to their court.
Mm-hmm.
He files his copy of that into their court. Now they cannot not recognize us. It's there.
Mm-hmm.
And we know it's there and we have proof it's there.
Hmm.
So what they've done in his case now is we have gone to court with him twice
Okay.
and they kick it down the road.
Hmm.
The last time we were ready to go to court for him, it was on a Thursday, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
And on Wednesday, they called him up and sent him an email saying the case has been put off until May 10th.
Oh, there's your right to a speedy trial.
So we're winning little steps one by one, but we have 36 sheriffs to go through. They're either going to take a proper oath or they're not.
Man. But
But but
yeah.
it's silly talk to talk about hanging somebody in the courthouse square.
Well, I don't think it is because that's the only people's elected official that, I mean, the only elected law authority. Because as you know, Yickwo versus Hopkins, all sovereignty was rest upon the people, and the people are the author of law. We authorize those who are authorized. We give our consent and delegate power like an elected sheriff. That's the only guy that has authority, is the sheriff, because it's a people elected position. It's a people elected office. So that office, if that doesn't matter, then I mean, God, these guys were bonded back as far as 1792, man. That's prior to the takeover of the Communist Party. I mean, the sheriff is a pretty serious position, and if they don't uphold the original Constitution and the people's will, all powers inherent in the people's. You said it yourself. If the people hold that sheriff accountable, that's the people's will.
And we're going to do it one by one. 4 members of our grand jury pool are meeting with each one of those 36 sheriffs, DAs, and presiding judges,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll either take a proper oath to a proper constitution in front of the 4 of us from our grand jury,
Mm-hmm.
or they won't. That's all
Interesting.
there is to it. At that point,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just thinking because you said a common law court is what you say it is, and it's 4. And there were 4 members that actually signed the the Declaration of Independence, that actually signed the Articles of Confederation for this perpetual union. There was actually 4 that signed that document. So I'm sorry, I was just thinking aloud, but go ahead.
So what we're going to do is force them to either be a lawful sheriff with an oath or to admit that they aren't. And when they admit they aren't, then we will try them and do what we need to do. But that's where we diverge.
Okay.
We
Okay.
don't go for incarceration and we don't go for execution. There's a lot of people that are willing to do that, but prosecuting for those, that's not something that we're doing. We don't find that in our charge.
I understand. I hear what you're saying. It's just that somebody has to take accountability for the office of the people and the public trust in that regard.
I
If that's,
agree.
well, I mean, hey, man, it is what it is. They don't have any problem executing somebody for not having a damn license. I'm not saying 2 wrongs make a right. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you take an oath to be sheriff by will of the people and all powers inherent in the people, as a sheriff, you should take that will of the people seriously. And if the people say, hey, go get those communists out of our courthouse, and you don't, that's an interesting dilemma we find ourselves in then, isn't it?
Yes. And we
Yeah.
have to solve it. And you have to do it for yourself. Nobody can do it for you, and you can't do it by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow we got to figure out how to do this. We figured out how to do Oregon. We have to figure out how to do the others and get them done. But I really have to go, honest.
Okay. Okay, I hear you, Ron. Well, all I want to say before you go is I really feel like Pennsylvania and the 33 original republic states are still there. They're just it still exists, like Bill said, under that 1849 Constitution has never been repealed. None of the original constitutions were ever repealed. All the people have to do is return home. Just return home by way of right of self-determination, by declaring it so, right?
Yes, I
Okay.
Yeah.
agree with you wholeheartedly.
Okay. Okay. Well,
I have to go.
thank you for joining, Ron. I appreciate it.
I
Okay, Ron. Good to
appreciate your
talk to you.
help.
We'll be doing it again.
Thank
Yes,
you.
we'll be
Thank you
back
very
again.
much.
Okay, to be continued. Bye-bye.
They do not want to let go of this. They do not intend on losing here. And we do not intend giving it back to them.
And then the bullets started flying. Then he jumps out of the car, and he's got both his hands up. And he got out of the car, and he had his hands in the air. He's like, just shoot me then. This is what you want, just shoot me. And they did. They shot him dead. With his hands in the air, and I saw it. I swear to God. He was just walking with his hands in the air. And they shot him. And they shot him dead, and then after he was down on the ground, they shot him 3 more times.